Let him bleed out. Colonel Aldrich Penn said it without blinking. 2 in the morning, fluorescent lights humming above him, a surgeon standing 2 feet away with blood still on his gloves. And the man in charge of the transfer spoke those 4 words like he was canceling a lunch order. The asset is compromised. We do not resuscitate, we contain. The surgeon's mouth opened. Penn stepped closer. That is a direct order, doctor. Stand down. The man strapped to the gurney inside that trauma bay had survived 4 years of hell. He had crawled back from the dead, and Penn wanted him gone before he could speak a single word. If you've never heard this story, stay until the very last second. Hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story reaches. Now let's go back to the moment it all began. The rain came down hard over San Antonio that night. Not the soft kind, the kind that hits the asphalt like accusations. Brooke Army Medical Center stood lit up against the black sky, and nurse Megan Cross was 11 hours into a 12-hour shift when the radio crackled with something that made the charge nurse go pale. Incoming trauma. Gunshot wounds, multiple. No ID, no civilian insurance. Federal escort. Civilians are not cleared for receiving. Megan had been a nurse for 14 years. Before that, she had been a forward medical specialist with the 101st Airborne, 2 tours, 2 commendations, 1 classified incident that ended her military career and began the version of herself she was still trying to understand. She had seen men die in the dirt. She had kept men alive in conditions that would make a textbook surgeon weep. Nothing rattled her, she thought. The double doors at the ambulance bay blew open at 2:17 in the morning. The gurney came in fast, 2 men in dark civilian clothing, pushing it with the grim efficiency of people who did not work for any hospital. The man strapped to it was enormous, 6 feet 3, maybe more. His arms were bound in psychiatric restraints, the heavy-duty leather kind reserved for psych holds. His tactical pants were shredded. His chest was bare and mapped with old scars that told stories of wars no one had officially admitted to fighting. Fresh blood ran from his left shoulder, his right thigh, and a ragged gash across his rib cage that looked like shrapnel work. But it was his eyes that stopped the room. Wide open, fully conscious, scanning every corner, every person, every exit with a precision that was not human panic. It was training. Pure, deep, absolute training burning beneath the surface of whatever hell he had just crawled out of. Clear the bay. The lead federal escort, a compact man with silver hair and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, moved with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed instantly. Trauma team only. This is a federal medical transfer. Doctor. Raymond Carr, the attending physician, rushed forward with a syringe already drawn. What's his blood type? What's his medication history? Unknown, the silver-haired man said. Unknown? He's got 3 gunshot wounds and you're giving me unknown? Unknown, the man repeated, and his eyes said that was the last answer Carr was going to get. Carr lunged for the patient's arm with the ketamine. He never made it. The man on the gurney moved with a speed that had no business existing in a body that had lost the amount of blood currently pooling beneath the wheel of the gurney. His right hand tore through the leather strap at the wrist with a single violent torque, the buckle snapping clean. His hand caught Carr's forearm mid-reach and twisted. The crack was audible over every monitor in the bay. Carr screamed and dropped the syringe. The patient roared. Not a yell, a roar. Primal, territorial, the sound of something that had been cornered too many times and had stopped being afraid of the corner. He swept the instrument tray off the stand beside him with his free hand. Steel clattered across the tile. A blood pressure cuff hit the wall. A nurse stumbled backward into the crash cart. Code Gray, security to Trauma Bay 3, Code Gray. The charge nurse's voice went out over the PA, and then the room turned into a controlled disaster. 4 security officers came through the side door, batons out. The patient was sitting halfway up on the gurney, blood pouring freely down his torso, one arm still restrained, the broken strap hanging from his wrist like a shed skin. He tracked the guards with his eyes the way a trained shooter tracks movement. Not reactive, not frantic, but deliberate. Sequenced. He was assigning threat levels. "Tase him!" Carr shouted from the floor, cradling his broken wrist. "Just put him down." "No." One word, quiet enough that it should have been lost under the chaos. It wasn't. Megan Cross stepped out from the supply alcove where she had pressed herself against the wall and watched. She had not been watching from fear. She had been watching because she needed to understand what she was looking at before she moved. "Bennett, he is actively dangerous," the head of security called out. "Cross," she said flatly. "My name is Cross, and if you tase him right now with that heart rate and that blood volume, you will kill him. His cardiac rhythm is already compromised. You will stop his heart. He's going to kill someone." "He hasn't killed anyone yet." Megan moved forward, past the line of security, past the paralyzed residents pressing themselves to the walls, toward the gurney. "Everybody back up. Give him room." "What are you doing?" the silver-haired federal agent snapped from the doorway. Megan ignored him. She raised both hands, palms open, fingers spread. She walked slowly. She kept her eyes on the patient's face, and she spoke at a steady, even volume, the way she had been taught a long time ago to speak to someone whose mind was somewhere else entirely. "You're safe," she said. "You're at a hospital. You're not in the field." The patient's eyes snapped to her. For a fraction of a second, the calculation behind them paused. Then his hand found a scalpel on the floor, dropped in the initial scramble, and he brought it up in a reverse grip. Professional. Lethal. "Back off," he rasped. His voice was gravel and rust, a voice that hadn't spoken above a whisper in a long time. "I won't give up the location. I won't." He was hallucinating. He was back wherever they had broken him. Megan stopped, 3 feet from the blade. She looked at his face, truly looked at it, the way she had trained herself not to in 14 years of emergency nursing. Because if you truly looked at the faces, you started collecting them, and the collection got too heavy to carry. She looked past the beard, past the grime, past the bruising, past the years written in the lines around his eyes. She looked at the tattoo on the inside of his left wrist. A chess piece. A rook. Black ink. Old, slightly faded at the edges. The kind of tattoo a young soldier gets with his unit. The noise in the room went somewhere far away. Megan had last seen that tattoo in a photograph her brother Jacob had taken on a satellite phone and sent her from a forward operating base in Mosul 4 years ago, with a message that read, "This is the guy who keeps me alive. Don't tell Mom he exists or she'll worry more." The man in the photograph had been laughing at something off camera, his wrist visible as he raised a coffee cup. Black chess piece, right there. Her brother Jacob had been dead for 4 years, killed in action, Mosul, no remains recovered. A folded flag and a commendation she kept in a box she hadn't opened since the funeral. And the man her brother had called the one who kept him alive was bleeding out on a gurney in her trauma bay, holding a scalpel to the room. Megan's breath left her in a single, controlled exhale. She took one more step. The blade was close enough to open her throat. "Sir," her voice dropped. Not soft, precise, like she was speaking a code. "Sir, I need you to listen to my voice." The patient's eyes locked on her. The scalpel didn't move. Megan thought of what her brother had told her once. Late on a video call, slightly drunk on whatever contraband spirits the unit had sourced, talking about the bonds inside his team the way Jacob always talked. Like if he explained it clearly enough, she could feel it too. "We don't use names in the field. Names are for headstones. We use call signs." "And Rafe," she had said. "What's his?" Her brother had grinned. "Rook. Because he never moves until he's already won." She leaned forward. She moved her mouth within 2 inches of the patient's ear, invading the tactical space that should have gotten her killed. and she lowered her voice to something barely above breath. "Rook," she said, "status check." The effect was physical, not gradual, immediate, like a circuit breaking. The tension that had been holding the man together, the supernatural, bleeding, impossible tension of a body running entirely on combat adrenaline, simply stopped. Not a collapse, a release. The scalpel lowered 3 inches, then 6. His breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, deepened without him choosing to deepen it. His eyes, which had been scanning for threats in every direction, went still and fixed on a single point somewhere in the middle distance. He blinked once. He turned to look at her, really look. For the first time since the gurney came through those doors, the soldier looked at her and actually saw a person. "Rook," she said again, steadying her voice against the hammering of her own heart. "You're at the rally point. We have you." He looked at the scalpel in his hand like he did not recognize it. His fingers opened. The blade hit the floor with a sound like a period at the end of a long and terrible sentence. "I'm compromised," he said. His voice had dropped completely. It was barely a sound. "I know," Megan said. She placed her hand on his uninjured shoulder. "But you're home." His eyes rolled. The adrenaline left him all at once. 4 years of running emptying out of his body in a single moment, and he fell back against the gurney like something had finally cut his strings. "Dr. Carr," Megan said, turning to the room with a voice that left no room for argument. "He's crashing. O negative, hanging now. Get the trauma surgeon. Move." The room unpacked itself from its paralysis. Nurses moved. Residents moved. The security officers holstered their batons and stepped back, looking at Megan with an expression she recognized. The expression people wear when something happens in front of them that they cannot fully explain and are not sure they want to. The federal agents in the doorway exchanged a look between themselves. The silver-haired man with the scar through his eyebrow said nothing. He just watched her. Megan didn't look at him. She grabbed the ambu bag and placed the mask over the patient's face and started pumping oxygen into his failing lungs while the team swarmed him from every side. She kept her hand on his shoulder. She kept her eyes on his face. As the anesthesia hit him and the drugs pulled him under, his hand came up one final time. Weak. A trembling, searching movement. He caught the edge of her scrub top and pulled her down an inch. "Jacob," he breathed. His eyes were barely slits. I didn't let go." Then he was gone. Megan stood over him. Her hand was still on his shoulder. The monitor was screaming a rhythm that the trauma team was already working to stabilize. Around her, the room was a storm of controlled medical violence, and she was the eye of it, standing completely still. I didn't let go. She understood, with a certainty that hit her like a physical blow, that those 4 words were not delirium. They were the most important thing this man had been carrying for 4 years. And whatever they meant, her brother Jacob was at the center of it. Dr. Carr was on the floor with a broken wrist, barking orders to a resident. A second surgeon had been paged. The federal escorts had moved to the wall to allow the medical team through. Megan counted the variables the way she had been trained to count them, one by one, methodically, even while her hands were shaking. The man on that table was legally dead. He had been dead for 4 years. He had come back with 3 bullet wounds, and whatever he had been carrying had someone in a very expensive suit willing to order a surgeon to let him bleed out in a hallway. And her brother's name had been the last word on his lips. Nurse Cross. The silver-haired man had crossed the room. He stopped beside her. He smelled of expensive cologne and something colder underneath it. He held up a credentials wallet and flipped it shut before she could read the name. Department of Naval Intelligence. You did good work in there. He's a patient, Megan said, not a piece of work. That depends on your perspective. His voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice of a man who had learned that pleasantness was its own kind of threat. My name is Penn, Colonel Aldrich Penn, and I need you to understand something very clearly before you leave this room tonight. Megan kept her eyes on the gurney. on the monitors, on the hands of the team working on the man Penn had tried to have killed 20 minutes ago. The patient you just treated, Penn said, does not exist. His name is not on any active roster. He is not a veteran. He is not a federal employee. He is a John Doe civilian contractor injured in a training incident. That is what your chart will reflect. That is what you will tell anyone who asks. Any deviation from that will constitute a violation of national security statutes. You will lose your license. He paused. At minimum. Megan finally turned to look at him. Penn had gray eyes, the pale, flat kind that don't change when the rest of the face shifts. He was looking at her with a patience that was more threatening than anger would have been, because patience meant he had done this before, and he already knew how it ended. Do we have an understanding, Nurse Cross? Megan looked at the closed door of the trauma bay. She looked at the man behind the glass, surrounded by a team fighting to keep him alive. The man Penn had just tried to have killed. The man whose last conscious word had been her dead brother's name. I understand, she said quietly. Penn nodded and turned to go. One thing, Megan said. Penn stopped. He responds to me. You saw what happened. When he wakes up, he'll be in the same state. Worse, maybe, if he doesn't know where he is. She kept her voice flat and clinical, the voice of a woman who was making an argument, not a plea. If you move him or reassign his care, you'll have another incident, worse than tonight. And this time you'll have cameras and witnesses and a room full of hospital staff who already saw enough to ask questions. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. I'll take the private duty assignment, night shift, no records beyond the John Doe file, just me and him. Penn studied her with those flat gray eyes for a long moment, calculating. Fine, he said. Night shift, no visitors, no external communication. You speak to no one about what you see or hear in that room. Agreed, Megan said. Penn walked out. Megan sat down in the plastic chair outside the trauma bay and pressed her hands flat against her thighs to stop the shaking. She had just made a deal with the man who had tried to have a patient murdered in her hospital. She had done it deliberately, with clear eyes, and she would do it again. Because the man in that room had been with Jacob when he died, and she was going to find out what he knew, even if it took the rest of everything she had left. Inside, the monitor beeped. Steady. Alive. Rook was listening. The ICU at 3 a.m. had its own kind of silence. Not peace, not rest. The silence of machines doing the work that bodies had stopped doing on their own. Megan sat in the corner of room 407, the only lamp on the desk casting a thin, yellow circle across her clipboard. She hadn't written a single word on the chart in 40 minutes. Her eyes hadn't left the bed. Rafe Hollister, John Doe, according to every document in the system, was a landscape of damage. The post-op swelling had settled into his face, purpling around both eyes, yellowing at the jaw. The ventilator hissed and clicked its steady rhythm. His wrists were cuffed to the bed rails with soft restraints, protocol after the incident in the trauma bay, and even unconscious, his hands were pulling against them. Not hard, slowly, like a man trying to work a knot loose in his sleep. He was dreaming. Megan knew the look. She had seen it in enough combat veterans to recognize the specific quality of that suffering. The way the eyelids move faster than REM should allow. The way the jaw tightens. The way the breathing shifts from the sedation pattern into something labored and private. He was back there, wherever there was. Penn's man was posted inside the door. Young, military police, working hard at looking bored. His phone was out. His attention was anywhere but the room. Megan watched the monitor. Heart rate climbing again. 98, 104, 109. She stood up to adjust his blanket. Her ID badge swung forward on its lanyard and brushed his forearm. His eyes opened like a switch had been thrown. No transition, no groggy surfacing. One moment sedated, the next fully present, pupils blown wide, body already pulling against the restraints with a force that made the bed frame shudder. He gagged on the intubation tube, his back arching, a sound coming from his throat that was pure animal distress. Easy. Megan put both hands on his chest and pushed, firm and steady. You're intubated. Stop fighting it. You'll tear your airway. His eyes found her face. They didn't stop there. They went to the guard in the corner, to the door, to the window, to the IV lines running into his arm, cataloging, assessing, threat ranking everything in the room in under 3 seconds. The door slid open. Penn stepped in without knocking. Is he conscious? Penn moved toward the bed with the efficiency of a man who owned the space. Get out, Megan said. She didn't turn around. I need to assess. You're spiking his cortisol. Look at the monitor. The number was climbing. 122, 134, 141. He has a tube down his throat and a man he doesn't trust standing 2 feet from him. If he codes in this room because you couldn't wait until morning, that is on you. Get out and close the door. Penn stopped. He looked at the monitor. He looked at Rafe, who was staring at him with an expression that was not fear. It was recognition. Cold, certain, absolute recognition. The recognition of a man who knows exactly who hurt him. Penn stepped back. 1 hour, he said. Then I'm bringing in my team for a full debrief. He has a tube in his throat, Megan said. He can't debrief anyone. 1 hour, Penn left. The door slid shut. Rafe was still staring at the door. Tears were running from the corners of his eyes, not from grief, from the intubation, from the physical agony of a body that had been through too much and was still being asked for more. He looked at Megan. His jaw worked around the tube. Okay, Megan said quietly. She glanced at the guard. His phone was out again. She pulled the privacy curtain 2/3 of the way around the bed, ostensibly to dim the light from the monitors. Okay, I'm going to pull the tube, but you have to stay calm. If you set off the alarm, Penn comes back in. Do you understand me? He blinked once. Deliberate. Yes. She silenced the alarm. She worked quickly, suctioning, deflating the cuff, her movements the precise shorthand of someone who had done this 100 times. On 3, cough. 1, 2, 3, she pulled. He arched, a guttural tearing sound coming from his chest as the tube came free. She held the basin while he coughed up bile, his whole body shaking with the effort. She put the oxygen mask over his face. Breathe, slow and deep. Don't try to talk yet. He breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The training was in his lungs even now. After a long moment, he took the mask off his own face. His voice, when it came, was wrecked. A whisper built out of broken glass. Who are you? Megan Cross, I'm your nurse. He studied her face. His eyes moved from her jaw to her nose to the set of her eyes, the way a man reads a map, looking for something specific. Something he was afraid to find and more afraid not to. Cross, he said. Yes. You look like him. The words landed in the center of her chest. Jacob was my brother, she said. She kept her voice level by an act of will that cost her more than she had expected. They told me he died in Mosul. They told me you died with him. Rafe turned his head away. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with the intubation damage. We both died in that valley, he said. Some of us just kept breathing anyway. What happened? She leaned closer, lowering her voice beneath the threshold of the guard's attention. The official report said IED. No remains. What actually happened, Rafe? His head came back around fast. His eyes locked on hers. Don't use that name. Not in here. Fine. She held his gaze. What happened? He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said very quietly, there was no IED. The monitor beeped, steady, indifferent. It was a setup, he said. We were sent in to recover a ledger, names of Americans running a weapons pipeline into the region. We got the ledger. We called for extraction. He stopped, swallowed. The effort it took him to say the next part was visible in every muscle of his face. The bird that came in didn't pick us up. Megan waited. It opened fire on us, he said. The room went very quiet. Friendly fire. The words existed in the official lexicon as accident, as tragedy, as the terrible cost of fog of war confusion. Megan had never once heard them used as a synonym for murder. Jacob, she said, her voice barely made it out. He took the first hit. Rafe's jaw was working, fighting something back. He pushed me into the ravine, gave me the ledger, told me to run. A pause that stretched too long. He stayed behind to draw their fire. He saved you. He saved the ledger, Rafe said. Same thing. He knew what was on it. He knew if it got buried, it was over. He looked at her with eyes that had been carrying this for 4 years and had not gotten lighter. I hid in the mountains, 3 years, moving, surviving, trying to find a way back that didn't put me in a box with a federal seal on it. I stowed out on a cargo ship to Norfolk. A Port Authority guard shot me when I came over the fence. That's how I ended up here. And Penn, Megan said, you recognized him. He was the voice on the radio that night, Rafe said. He ordered the strike. Megan sat back. She looked at the door. Penn was out there. Penn, who smelled of expensive cologne and patience. Penn, who had told a surgeon to let the man bleed out and had only backed down because Megan had made herself useful. Penn, who was now running a clock in the hallway and calling it a debrief. He's not here to protect you, she said. It was not a question. He's here to finish the job, Rafe said. Whatever he told you about a secure facility, about a debrief, that's not where I end up. He needs what I'm carrying. Once he has it, I'm done. What are you carrying? Rafe looked at her for a long moment, calculating, deciding how much she had already paid to be in this room and whether it was enough to trust her with the rest. He reached a conclusion she could see arriving in his eyes, like weather changing. The shrapnel in my back, he said, the fragment they left near the spine. The surgeon said it was too risky to remove. It would encapsulate. It's not shrapnel. His voice was completely flat. It's a biocapsule, biosafe polymer casing, micro SD inside. Everything that was on that ledger, plus 4 years of documentation I put together in the field. Names, transactions, dates, transfers. The whole architecture of what Penn and his network have been running through DoD procurement channels. He held her eyes. Penn knows it's in me. He knew the moment I turned up at this hospital. He's not taking me to a facility. He's taking me to a table where someone cuts it out of my back. And then I'm John Doe with no name and no file and no one asking questions. The guard in the corner shifted in his chair. His phone screen lit up his face blue-white. Neither of them spoke until he settled again. Megan's mind was running the math. The kind of math that had nothing to do with nursing and everything to do with the 2 years she had spent embedded with a forward element that operated in spaces where the official rules were theoretical at best. She had not thought about those years in a long time. She had deliberately stopped thinking about them. You said 4 years of documentation, she said. Jacob died 4 years ago. Yes. He's on the card. Rafe's jaw tightened. Yes. Is it just his name, or is there more? Rafe looked at her with something that was almost pity and almost something else, something gentler that didn't fit the rest of his face. He recorded a message before he died, Rafe said. He gave me the camera. He told me to make sure someone saw it. He paused. He said your name. Megan pressed her hand flat against the bedrail to keep herself upright. Her knuckles went white. She did not cry. She had made a decision a long time ago about crying, about when and where and in front of whom. And this was not the time, and this was not the place, and if she started, she would not stop. "Okay," she said. Her voice was steady. "Okay." The guard stood up to stretch. Megan turned to the supply cart and began reorganizing dressings with the studied casualness of a nurse on hour 12 of a shift who had nothing more interesting to do. Rafe watched her. He was running his own assessment, she could feel it, the way you feel a camera on you when you can't see it. When the guard sat back down and the phone came back out, Rafe moved his fingers against the bedrail. Not restless, deliberate. Tap, 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 tap. Morse code. Megan had learned it at 11 years old. She and Jacob, tapping messages through the bedroom wall on the nights their parents were fighting. A secret language, their own frequency. She stiffened but didn't react visibly. She kept her hands moving on the dressing cart. She tapped back with her index finger on the metal edge of the cart, soft and rhythmic, the way you'd tap out a nervous habit. Ho long. Rafe tapped back without hesitating. Pen movis stony. Het. Her hand stopped for exactly one beat too long. She recovered. She tapped. Air user. His reply came back like a statement of fact, no waver in it at all. Hail weighs movis satin. Pen moves tonight. Megan kept her face neutral. She picked up a package of sterile gauze and held it up like she was checking the expiration date. The guard hadn't moved. She walked to Rafe's bedside and began checking the dressing on his shoulder wound, using the proximity and the curtain and her own body to shield his face from the camera mounted in the upper corner of the room. "I need a way out," Rafe said under his breath, barely moving his lips. "You can barely sit up." "I've operated in worse condition." "That's not reassuring." She pressed the edges of the dressing down, her fingers working with careful professionalism. "If you run, Penn puts the entire facility on lockdown, every exit covered." "There's a landline in this room," he said. "The crash cart, hardwired. Penn jammed the cellular frequencies, but he can't jam copper wire." Megan thought about that. She thought about who would be on the other end of a number that had been dark for 4 years. She thought about what it meant that he knew there was a contingency in place, that someone was waiting for a call that might never come. "Who do you call?" she asked. "People Penn doesn't have files on," Rafe said. "People who stopped existing around the same time I did." She looked at him. "How long do you need once you're on the phone?" 2 minutes. "The guard checks on me every 15 minutes. You have a window." She stepped back from the dressing. "But Rafe," she said his name quietly, deliberately, and watched his eyes come up to hers. "If Penn is moving tonight, we're already in the window." As if the building had been listening and decided that was its cue, the lights in the ICU flickered. Not a power surge, one controlled flicker, the kind that happens when a building's security system is being selectively overridden from an external panel. Megan knew that flicker. She had seen it used before in a context she was not supposed to remember. Rafe knew it too. His whole body went still in the way prey animals go still, not from fear, but from the absolute conservation of every resource before the moment arrives. "He moved up the timeline," Rafe said. "Guard," Megan said, turning toward the corner before she finished the thought, already planning the next 30 seconds. The guard was standing, his phone put away, his hand moving toward his radio. "Stay here," she told him, the voice of a nurse in command of her floor. "This could be a generator issue. I'm going to check the panel in the hallway." "My orders are to stay with—" "Your orders don't include letting the ventilators fail," she said. "Stay with the patient." She walked out of the room. The hallway was empty. Wrong. It should not have been empty. At this hour, there were always 2 nurses at the station, a resident doing rounds, an orderly. The silence was the kind that gets manufactured. Someone had cleared the floor. Megan walked to the crash cart at the end of the hall. She lifted the emergency panel cover. The bat phone was underneath, coiled in its cradle, old and hardwired and completely invisible to any frequency jamming Penn's people had put in place. She pulled it out and walked back to the room. The guard looked up. "What is that?" Backup communication line, Megan said. Protocol during power fluctuation. She moved past him to the bedside and held the receiver out to Rafe. Rafe dialed without hesitation. A number he had been holding in memory for 4 years. The way you hold a prayer. Not with expectation, but with the discipline of keeping it ready. 1 ring, 2 rings. Roadhouse, a voice answered. Flat, bored, perfectly calibrated. Rafe's voice changed, stripped down to something compact and operational. This is Rook Actual, Broken Arrow, Authentication Lima Bravo 77. I am at Brooke Army Medical Center, San Antonio, room 407. Package is intact. The wolf is at the door. A pause on the other end. The boredom was gone. We have you, Rook. Assets rolling. ETA 22 minutes. Negative 22, Rafe said. Pen moved up. We're out of the room in 10. Copy that. Moving. He hung up. The guard was on his feet now, his hand on his radio. Who was that? Who did you just call? Sit down, Megan said. I'm calling this in. I'm calling. Sit down, Rafe said. Something in his voice, not loud, not aggressive, simply absolute, made the guard hesitate. It was the voice of a man who had spent a career being the last sound some people heard, and even stripped of everything, even strapped to a hospital bed, it carried the full weight of that history. The hesitation was enough. Megan moved to the guard's left side. I need help turning the patient. He's dead weight and I can't reposition him alone. Come to this side. The guard exhaled through his nose and walked over. Fine. What do you need? Lean over the rail, she said. Just hold his shoulder while I... Rafe's hand came up from under the blanket where she had loosened the soft restraint during the dressing change. He caught the guard's collar and pulled him down sharply, driving the man's forehead into the metal bedrail with a single controlled motion. Not the explosive violence of the ER. Precise. Surgical. The guard dropped without a sound. Megan checked his pulse immediately. He's alive. I pulled it, Rafe said, already swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His face went the color of old ash from the effort, but he didn't stop moving. How long until Penn's people breach the door? Maybe 8 minutes, less if someone checks the camera feed. She pulled the IV lines free, capping the ports out of reflex, her hands moving on their own while her mind ran the building layout. You can't walk without support. I've done worse. That's still not reassuring. He stood, swayed, grabbed her shoulder, did not go back down. They moved into the hallway together, Rafe's arm across her shoulders, Megan bearing more of his weight than he was probably aware of. The floor was empty in both directions, cleared. Penn's work, meant to create a quiet kill zone, had instead given them a corridor with no witnesses. Stairwell, Rafe said. East side. There are 2 men coming up the east stairwell. He looked at her. How do you know that? Because I walked this floor before you woke up, and I counted exits, and Penn only had 3 people on this building, she said. And she did not elaborate on how she knew to count exits, or when that particular habit had been installed in her, because that was a conversation for a different time. West stairwell goes down to the loading dock. Service elevator is on this side. The shaft runs all the way to the basement. Rafe looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read, like he was recalculating something. Jacob said you were a nurse. Jacob was right. He left out the rest. He always did. She pushed open the door to the service corridor. Move! Behind them, at the far end of the hallway, the elevator chimed. The doors began to open. And the sound that came out of that elevator was not footsteps. It was the deliberate, unhurried sound of a man who had already decided how this ended and was simply arriving to confirm it. Penn's voice carried clean and cold through the empty ICU. Nurse Cross, I think we're past the point of negotiation. Megan didn't freeze. Freezing was a luxury she had trained out of herself a long time ago, in conditions that bore no resemblance to a hospital corridor. and the muscle memory of that training kicked in now with a clarity that felt almost cold. She pulled Rafe through the service door and let it close behind them without a sound. "How far?" Rafe said. He was moving, barely. Every step was costing him something he didn't have left to spend, and they both knew it, and neither one said it out loud. 2 corridors. Loading dock is at the end of the second one. Service elevator is faster, but Penn will have the controls by now. Then we walk. You can barely stand. Megan, he said her name the same way her brother used to say it when she was overthinking a problem. Flat, direct, cut to the point. I have walked farther than this, with worse holes in me. Keep moving. She kept moving. She took more of his weight. He let her, which told her more about how bad it actually was than anything he would have admitted out loud. Behind them, through the service door, she heard the "I see you." Penn's voice again, closer now, talking to someone on a radio. The words muffled, but the tone unmistakable. Organized, unhurried, the tone of a man running a procedure he had run before. The service corridor was narrow and lit by a single row of fluorescent tubes that buzzed at a frequency designed to give you a headache. Megan counted the doors as they passed. Supply closet, linen room, bio-waste station. She had memorized this floor 6 hours ago while Rafe was in surgery and Penn was making phone calls in the waiting room. And she was walking the building the way her training had taught her, quietly, with purpose, storing the geography. The loading dock will be covered, Rafe said. I know. Penn's not stupid. I know that too. So what's the plan? The plan is we get to the dock and we see what's there and we adjust. She glanced sideways at his face. The color had gone from ash to something worse. How are your stitches? Fine. You're lying. I'm managing, he said, which was a different thing, and they both understood the distinction. They reached the corner of the second corridor. Megan stopped. She put her back against the wall and looked around the edge. One man, standing at the dock doors with his arms crossed and his jacket open in a way that meant a shoulder holster underneath. Not Penn's regular escorts. This one was younger, broader, the particular build of someone who was employed specifically for situations where other solutions had already failed. Rafe looked past her at the man. He was quiet for a moment, running the math. 1. Single exit point. Penn put his weakest coverage at the dock because he doesn't think we made it this far. He thinks we're still in the East Wing. He doesn't know I walked this floor. No, Rafe said, he doesn't. He looked at the taser she was still carrying, the one she had taken from the guard in the room. Give me that. You can barely raise your arm. My arm is fine. My legs are the problem. He held out his hand. She gave him the taser. I need you to walk out there first. Just a nurse. You work here. You have a reason to be in this corridor at 4 in the morning. When he focuses on you, I come around the corner. And if he shoots me? He won't shoot a nurse on a hospital loading dock with cameras running. Penn needs clean. He needs quiet. That's his whole operation. Megan looked at the man by the door. She looked at the cameras mounted at each corner of the dock. Rafe was right. Penn was meticulous. Penn ran clean operations in clean environments with controlled variables. A nurse shot on a loading dock was not a clean variable. Give me 15 seconds, she said. She walked out. She didn't hurry. She carried a clipboard she had picked up from the linen room. Empty, but it looked official. And she walked with the specific, exhausted authority of a nurse on hour 13 of a shift who had a task to complete and no patience for obstacles. The man by the door straightened when he saw her. His hand moved toward his jacket. I need to sign off on a delivery, Megan said, not breaking stride. Pharmaceutical shipment was supposed to come in 2 hours ago, and nobody logged it. I've been looking for it since midnight. She held up the clipboard. Do you know if anyone on your detail saw a refrigerated truck? The man stared at her. His hand was still near his jacket, but not on it. He was recalibrating. She was just a nurse with a clipboard. She fit every visual cue of someone who belonged here. "I'm not with the hospital," he said. "I can see that," Megan said pleasantly. "Is that why you didn't log the truck?" He opened his mouth. The taser hit him in the back of the neck. He went down hard, full muscle lock, the clipboard clattering off the wall as Megan stepped aside and let him drop. Rafe came around the corner, one hand braced against the wall, the taser still smoking. "Nice clipboard work," he said. "Nice aim for a man who can barely stand." "I told you my arm was fine." He looked at the dock doors. "Push the bar." The night air hit them like cold water thrown in the face. San Antonio at 4 in the morning had its own particular quality. The last of the heat from the day still rising off the concrete, the distant sound of a highway, the smell of diesel, and somewhere under it, the cut grass smell that always surprised people who expected Texas to smell like dust. They moved along the side of the building, keeping to the shadow line. Rafe was leaning on her more heavily now and not bothering to pretend otherwise. His breathing had changed, shorter, controlled but shorter, the involuntary rationing of a body that was spending more than it was taking in. "How long until your people get here?" Megan said. 7 minutes, maybe 8. "Penn is going to have units on every exit in 4. Then we don't stay on the perimeter." He stopped. He looked at the parking structure adjacent to the main building, connected at the second level by a covered walkway. The structure, 3rd level, there's a sight line to the north access road from the top deck. Megan thought about the 3rd level of a parking structure and a man who was currently leaking through his surgical dressings. "You want to climb." "I want to get to a position where I can see what's coming before it arrives," Rafe said. "There is a difference." "Not for your stitches, there isn't." "Megan," again that flat, direct tone, her brother's tone. "Move." They went up the stairwell inside the structure, Rafe's hand on the rail, Megan's hand at his back, not guiding so much as ready. He made it to the 2nd level without stopping. The 3rd level cost him something. She felt it in the way his weight shifted, the slight hitch in his breathing that he was too controlled to let become audible. But he made it. The top deck was open. 3 cars, a motorcycle, the vast, indifferent sky still dark, but beginning to think about changing its mind at the far eastern edge. Rafe moved to the northern wall and looked out at the access road. He was scanning without a scope, without tools, with nothing but the eyes that had once been considered among the best in his unit and 4 years of enforced sharpness. He tracked the road, the side entrance, the corner where the service vehicles turned in. 2 vehicles at the east gate, he said. "Penn's people. They're setting the cordon." "Then we're boxed in." "We're boxed in for 6 minutes, he said. "There's a difference." A pause. He turned to look at her. In the dark, his face was stripped down to its essentials. The scar tissue, the jaw, the eyes that had been carrying too much for too long. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You could have stayed in that room, kept your license, kept your job." "No," Megan said. "I couldn't." He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he said, "Jacob talked about you every single day. Not in a way that made it weird, just the way some people carry their people with them. He'd see something and he'd say, 'Megan would have a word for this.' Or, 'Megan would have figured this out faster.' Like you were this standard he was measuring everything against." Megan didn't answer. She was looking at the access road. "He was scared you'd never know what happened," Rafe said. "Not for himself, for you. He didn't want you to spend the rest of your life thinking he just died for nothing on a hillside." He stopped. Something moved through his face that wasn't the soldier at all. "He recorded that message the day he died. He made me promise to bring it back. I made that promise and I meant to keep it a lot sooner than 4 years." "You're here now," Megan said. Her voice was steady. It cost her everything to keep it that way. 4 years late. "You're here now," she said again, and the repetition was not agreement, it was instruction. "Let it go. We're not there yet. Stay present." He heard it. He nodded once. He looked back at the road, headlights on the access road, moving fast and without the hesitation of a vehicle following posted speed limits. 2 sets, then a third, coming from the other direction. "That's Penn closing the net," Rafe said. "Or that's your people." He watched. He counted. He read something in the pattern of movement that Megan couldn't read without his eyes or his training. Second vehicle, the one running dark on the side road. His voice changed slightly, tightened. "That's Briggs." "How do you know?" "Because Briggs always runs dark on the approach. He says headlights are a conversation, and he doesn't like conversations." A pause. "And because no government vehicle parks at a 45-degree angle to a gate unless the driver learned to park in Fallujah." The second vehicle stopped at a position that covered the maximum number of approaches. A door opened. A figure got out. Large, moving with an efficiency that had nothing to do with hurry and everything to do with purpose. Even from 3 levels up and in near darkness, the prosthetic leg was visible in the way the gate was calibrated, the slight mechanical precision in the left step. "That's him," Rafe said, and for the first time since the ER, Megan heard something in his voice that wasn't pain or control or the deep exhaustion of a man running on borrowed time. It was relief, the involuntary kind, the kind you don't manufacture. They went down the stairwell faster than they'd come up, Rafe pushing through what was clearly significant pain with the specific tolerance of someone who had made a decision that pain was not currently relevant. By the time they came out at the ground level, Briggs was moving along the shadow line toward them with 2 men behind him, both carrying themselves the way Rafe carried himself, the compressed, aware stillness of people who had spent time in places where stillness was the difference between coming home and not. Briggs was 6'4", broad as a doorway, with a beard that had given up being groomed somewhere around the 2nd year of whatever operation had taken his leg. He stopped when he saw Rafe, and for a single instant his face did something that the rest of his presentation was clearly designed to prevent. He looked like a man who had been told someone was dead and was now looking at them standing in a parking lot. "You look terrible," Briggs said. "You're late," Rafe said. "We were in Shreveport." He looked at Megan. "You cross?" "Yes. Jacob's sister." He said it as a statement, not a question, as if he knew, as if they all knew. "He talked about you." He didn't explain further. He looked back at Rafe. "Can you move?" "I'm moving, aren't I?" "I mean in the van, genius, for more than 5 minutes, because we've got Penn's units coming up the north approach in about 3 minutes before they lock down every vehicle exit from this block." The van was nondescript. Plumbing company name on the side, deliberately faded. Inside it was nothing like a plumbing van. Monitors on the walls, reinforced floor, a field medical kit strapped to the side panel that was better stocked than most forward operating aid stations Megan had seen. She registered all of it in approximately 4 seconds and turned immediately to Rafe, who had gotten himself onto the makeshift stretcher in the back and was running on something very close to empty. "He's bleeding through the shoulder dressing," she said to the room in general, already opening the field kit. "We don't have blood," said the man beside her, lean, quiet, a scar running jaw to temple. He handed her saline without being asked. "Dutch." "Saline alone isn't going to hold him," Megan said. "It'll hold him for 40 minutes, Dutch said. "Safe house is 30. 35 if Briggs drives like a human being," Briggs called from the front. "Briggs drives like a human being and we all die," Dutch said. This appeared to be an established fact between them, offered without humor and received the same way. The van moved, fast. Megan worked. She pulled the shoulder dressing and pressed a hemostatic pad against the bleeder that had opened during the stairwell climb, holding pressure with both hands, feeling the pulse under her fingers. Too fast, too shallow, but there. Rafe's hand found her wrist. "The capsule," he said. His voice was fraying at the edges now. "Megan, the capsule has to come out. Not in a moving vehicle." Penn has a biomonitor on me. It's passive, but if my vitals drop below threshold, I know what a biomonitor is. Then you know if I flatline, the signal changes. He'll track the capsule to whatever location my body ends up in. His grip on her wrist tightened. Not hard, urgent. It has to come out before we get to the safe house. If Penn's people follow the signal, the safe house is gone. Everyone in it is gone. Megan looked at Dutch. Dutch nodded. He's right. We've been running signal noise since we picked you up, but it won't hold indefinitely. She looked at the field kit. Scalpel, hemostats, forceps. No anesthesia beyond a topical that would do approximately nothing for what she was about to do. She looked at Rafe. He was watching her with complete steadiness, which was its own kind of answer. Roll onto your side, she said. Dutch, hold him. Briggs, if you hit one more pothole before I'm done, I will personally ensure you lose the other leg. Copy that, Briggs said, and the van smoothed out noticeably. She found the capsule by feel. The scar tissue over it was dense, years of the body trying to negotiate with a foreign object that refused to be absorbed. She made the incision clean and fast, and Rafe made a sound that was not a scream. It was the sound of a man refusing to scream, which is its own particular kind of awful to be close to. And Dutch held him steady without being asked. Blood, pressure, forceps. There. She pulled it free. A small rectangle of biosafe polymer, slick and dark, about the size of a man's thumbnail. She held it in the forceps and looked at it for a moment. This was what 4 years of running and hiding and surviving looked like. This was what Jacob had died for her brother to carry home. This tiny, insignificant-looking rectangle that had the weight of every name on it, every dollar amount, every order that had gone out over a radio on a hillside in Mosul. She pressed the wound closed and held it. I need a suture kit. Dutch had one open before she finished the sentence. Rafe was conscious throughout. He had bitten through a folded piece of rubber tubing Dutch had given him, and his face was the color of concrete, and he had not made another sound after that first one. When Megan finally tied off the last stitch and sat back, her hands were red to the wrists, and the van had gone quiet in a way that felt like the room after a very close lightning strike. Rafe spit out the tubing. He breathed. He looked at the ceiling of the van, and he breathed. It's out, Megan said. He closed his eyes. Good. It's not good. You have 2 open bleeders, and I've been holding pressure for 20 minutes, and you need a proper OR. Safe House has a table, Dutch said. A table is not an OR. It has everything except the name on the door, Dutch said. He was already on a tablet, running something, his face lit blue-white. We're 4 minutes out. Penn's units are moving northwest. The signal scrubber did its job. They're chasing a ghost. Rafe opened his eyes. He found Megan's face. He looked at her the way someone looks at a person when they are deciding whether to say the true thing or the manageable thing, and she could see the decision happening in real time. Jacob's video, he said. It's on the card. I need you to be ready for what he says. Megan looked at the small capsule, now sealed in a sterile bag in her gloved hand. How bad is it? Rafe was quiet for exactly 1 second. It's everything, he said. All of it. Every name, every number, and him telling you directly why he stayed behind. He paused. He knew you'd be the one watching it. He recorded it for you specifically. Not for a court, not for a debrief. For you. The van stopped. The Safe House was an auto body shop that had closed sometime in the previous decade and hadn't been touched since in any way that was visible from the street. Inside the roll-up door, down a set of concrete stairs, was the basement, and the basement was exactly what Dutch had described. A table, proper lighting mounted on adjustable arms, supply cabinets that were organized with military precision, 3 monitors running on a secured local network. They moved Rafe to the table. Megan worked for the next 2 hours with Dutch assisting and Briggs pacing the floor above them, at intervals that she tracked by the sound of his prosthetic on the concrete. She repaired the shoulder bleeder. She closed the back wound properly. She hung a second saline bag and monitored his pressure until it climbed back into a range that stopped making her jaw tight. When she finally stepped away from the table and stripped her gloves, the basement was quiet. Rafe was sedated with the mild agent Dutch had produced from the supply cabinet. Not knocked out, just held at the edge of sleep, his vitals steady, his breathing even. The color had come back to his face in the incremental way that means the body has decided, for now, to continue. Dutch was at the monitors. Briggs was at the top of the stairs, watching the street. The third man, the one who had not spoken a single word since they left the hospital, and whom Dutch had introduced only as Ghost, was seated in the corner running the biocapsule through a reader that looked like it had been built by someone who knew what they needed and couldn't find it commercially. "It's intact," Ghost said, first words he had spoken all night. His voice was low, precise, carrying the accent of somewhere coastal and southern. "Encryption is layered, military grade. Going to take me 20 minutes to get into the video file." "Do the financials first," Dutch said. "The video," Megan said. Both men looked at her. She didn't apologize for the interruption. She looked at Ghost directly. "The video first, then the financials, please." Ghost looked at Dutch. Dutch looked at Megan for a moment, and whatever he saw in her face settled the question. He nodded once. "Video first," Dutch said. Ghost worked. The basement was very quiet. Briggs came down the stairs and stood against the wall with his arms crossed, and his face set in the expression of a man who was preparing himself for something he already knew was going to be difficult. Like he had heard about this video, like he had been thinking about it for 4 years. The screen flickered, file structure loading. A single video file, timestamp burned into the corner. 4 years, 3 months, 11 days ago. Ghost looked at Megan. He didn't ask. He just looked at her, giving her the choice. "Play it," she said. The image was shaky, handheld, the camera barely held steady. A hillside, dust, the sound of small arms fire in the distance, close enough to be immediate, far enough to mean there was still a few minutes left. A man came into frame. He was sitting against a rock, and his left leg below the knee was wrapped in a tourniquet that had gone dark with blood. His face was filthy, cut above the eye, and he was squinting against the dust and the blood running into his vision. But his eyes were clear. He was present. He knew exactly what he was doing. Megan made a sound she had not planned to make. Not loud. A single, short exhalation, like something leaving her body that she had been holding since the funeral. Jacob Cross looked into the camera, and he said, "If you're watching this, Rook made it. That means I didn't, and that's okay." He stopped. He looked over his shoulder at the sound of the gunfire, then back. "I need to tell you what happened here because they're going to bury it. They are very good at burying things. But they haven't met my sister." He almost smiled. The almost smile that Megan had grown up with, the one that lived at the corner of his mouth before it decided whether to commit. "Megan," he said, "Claire Bear, I'm sorry I couldn't come home, but you need to hear this from me, not from a file, not from a lawyer, not from a congressional hearing, from me." The gunfire in the background got closer. Jacob didn't look away from the camera, and he began to tell her everything. Jacob spoke for 11 minutes. Megan did not move for any of it. She stood with her arms at her sides, and her hands loose, and her face doing nothing that she was aware of, and she listened to her brother's voice coming out of a speaker in a basement in San Antonio. Recorded on a hillside in Mosul 4 years ago, while men were trying to kill him, while his leg was gone below the knee, while the window of his survival was closing by the minute. He was calm. That was the thing that undid her more than anything else. Jacob had always been calm when it mattered. He was the one in their family who absorbed the chaos and gave back steadiness. And even here, even at the end of everything, he was doing it. Speaking clearly, organizing his thoughts, making sure she would understand. He told her about the mission, The ledger, the names, American contractors, 2 active duty generals, a sitting undersecretary of defense, all running a procurement fraud operation that had been laundering defense dollars into a private arms pipeline for 6 years. He told her about Operation Cinder, the name Penn had given the cleanup when the unit got too close. He named Penn directly. He gave dates, grid coordinates, radio call signs. He described the helicopter coming in on the extraction vector and opening fire, and the way the team scattered, and the way Rafe had pulled him behind a boulder, and the way his leg had ceased to exist sometime in the next 4 seconds. Then he looked into the camera and said, "I told Rook to run. He didn't want to. I had to argue with him. You know how that is, Meg. When you're arguing with someone and you're right, and they're right, and neither of you is going to change your position." The almost smile again. "I outranked him by a grade, so I pulled rank. First and only time I ever did it." His voice shifted. "He's the best man I've ever known. If he made it back, you take care of him. You hear me? That's not a request." He looked over his shoulder once more. The gunfire was very close. "I didn't die for nothing," he said. "I died for this, for the names on that card, for the people who are going to be saved because those names end up in the right hands." He leaned toward the camera. His eyes were the eyes she had grown up with, steady and dark and entirely themselves even now. "Megan, Claire Bear, I love you. Tell Mom I was thinking about her cooking." He stopped. "Actually, don't tell her that. She'll take it too hard. Tell her I was thinking about the lake. She'll know what that means." The screen went black. The basement was completely silent. Briggs had his hand over his mouth. Dutch was looking at the floor. Ghost had gone still in the particular way of someone who is managing something privately and intends to keep managing it privately. Rafe was awake, had been awake for most of it, Megan realized, lying on the table with his face turned toward the monitor, listening to the voice of the man who had saved his life. Megan didn't cry. She had promised herself in the first 30 seconds of the video that she was not going to cry until she had finished the job Jacob had handed her, and she intended to keep that promise. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth 4 times. She looked at the monitor, the black screen, the timestamp frozen in the corner. Then she turned to Ghost. "The financials. How long?" Ghost looked at her. He had been crying, she registered distantly, which somehow made him more human than anything else he had done all night. He wiped his face with the back of his hand without commenting on it. 20 minutes for a full decryption. The structure is there. I can already see the header files. Names, account numbers, transaction records. 4 years of it. Penn has those names on his list, Megan said. He's been protecting them this whole time, which means they're still active, still in their positions. Most of them, Dutch said. He was on his tablet, the professional mask back in place. The undersecretary retired 8 months ago. The 2 generals are still serving. The contractors are still holding active DoD contracts worth a combined $4.7 billion. 4 years, Megan said. 4 years of Penn running cleanup while they kept operating. That's what the money bought, Dutch said. Rafe spoke from the table. His voice was rough from the sedative wearing off, but it was level. Penn doesn't know where the capsule is. He doesn't know if we extracted it. Right now he's operating on the assumption that I'm either dead or running. And if I'm running, the evidence is still in me. He pushed himself up on one elbow. Megan moved to stop him and he shook his head. "I'm fine. Let me sit up. You had 2 open bleeders 4 hours ago, and you closed both of them." He held her gaze. "Let me sit up, Megan." She stepped back. He got himself upright, slow and deliberate, and the effort cost him a visible amount, but he arrived at vertical and stayed there. "We have a window," he said. "Penn is running blind right now. He has the hospital locked down. He has units on the roads, but he doesn't have the capsule, and he doesn't have us, and he's a man who operates on information. Take away his information and he stalls." Rafe looked at Dutch. Who's in Washington tonight? Congressman David Merritt's office. He's on the Armed Services Subcommittee. He's been running a quiet investigation into DoD procurement anomalies for 8 months. He doesn't have evidence. He has questions and a staff attorney with good instincts. Dutch paused. He also lost a son in Mosul. Different unit, same approximate timeline. The room absorbed that for a moment. He'll look at the files, Megan said. He'll do more than look, Dutch said. But we need to get to him before Penn figures out where we are and decides that a congressman asking questions is easier to silence than 4 people in a basement. Briggs spoke from the wall. There's a problem. Everyone looked at him. Penn had eyes on this neighborhood 3 hours before we arrived, Briggs said. He was looking at his phone, at something that had just come through, his face doing the thing it did when the news was bad, and he was deciding how bad to say it. Ghost Scanner picked up a passive signal 20 minutes ago. Low frequency, the kind that runs on a timer. Somebody painted this block before we got here. He looked up. Penn doesn't know which building, but he knows the block. How long before he narrows it down? Rafe said. 2 hours, maybe 90 minutes if he has better equipment than we think. He has better equipment, Rafe said, flat, certain. He always has better equipment. Megan looked at the monitor, at the frozen black screen, at the timestamp. She thought about Jacob sitting on that hillside knowing the window was closing, doing the work anyway because the work was what mattered, not the window. She thought about 4 years of Penn operating freely, of 2 generals still in uniform, of contractors still billing the government billions of dollars, of the folded flag on the shelf in her apartment that she had never once considered throwing away. We don't go to Merritt's office, she said. Dutch looked at her. That's the safest conduit for the... Safe is slow, Megan said, and slow is what Penn is counting on. She looked around the room, at Briggs and Dutch and Ghost, at Rafe sitting on the table with 2 sets of fresh stitches, and the particular stillness of a man who has already decided to trust you and is waiting to see what you do with it. Penn is a man who controls information. He controls who sees it, when they see it, and what context they see it in. He's been doing it for years. That's his weapon. She looked at Ghost's monitor. So we take away his control. You want to go public, Rafe said. I want to go public before he can frame the narrative, Megan said. Before he can call it a terrorist incident, or a disgruntled vet, or a classified material breach. Before he can call Merritt's office and suggest that the congressman might want to be careful about what he associates himself with. She paused. Jacob recorded that video for me, not for a court filing, not for a classified debrief that gets buried in a committee drawer. For me, which means he always intended it to be something a person could look at and understand without a security clearance. The room was quiet. There's a Veterans Day memorial ceremony in Washington tomorrow evening, Dutch said slowly. He was already pulling something up on his tablet. National Mall. Major media presence. General Howard Kress is the keynote speaker. Kress is the senior general on Jacob's ledger. He was the theater commander during Operation Cinder. He's receiving a Distinguished Service Medal tomorrow night. The silence in the basement took on a different quality. Tell me about the venue, Rafe said. Dutch walked them through it. The ceremony was on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Network television, live stream, approximately 8,000 people in attendance. Media risers set up on both sides. The event's AV infrastructure was contracted through a company Dutch apparently had prior familiarity with. He said this without elaborating, and nobody asked him to. And the system included 4 massive LED displays mounted on scaffolding flanking the main stage. If someone were to replace the scheduled content on those displays, Dutch said, they would be replacing it in front of 8,000 people, 4 major network camera feeds, and a live stream that last year got 2.3 million concurrent viewers. Can you do it? Rafe said. Ghost answered instead of Dutch. I can do it. Simple, no flourish. The voice of a man who had been asked if he could do technically complex things in hostile environments before, and had learned that the honest answer was shorter than the explanation. Penn will see it coming, Briggs said. Not the specific play, but he'll know we didn't just disappear. He'll have security at that event. Penn will be at that event, Rafe said.
Everyone looked at him.
A ceremony honoring the man whose name is at the top of that ledger. Penn goes. He always goes. It's how he operates. Stay close to the power. Stay visible. Stay legitimate. He looked at Megan. He'll be there, which means if we can get the video on those screens, we can have him in custody before he makes a phone call. Megan sat down on the edge of a supply cabinet. She was tired in a way that went past the body and into something structural, the fatigue of a person who has been running at maximum capacity for too many consecutive hours and is choosing to keep running anyway. She thought about her apartment, her stethoscope on the hook by the door, the folded flag in its case on the shelf above the bookshelf, the photograph of her and Jacob at the lake, both of them squinting into the sun, Jacob holding up a fish he was absurdly proud of. She thought about her mother saying, at the funeral, with a steadiness that had broken Megan's heart more than tears would have, "He knew what he believed in. That's all I asked." "I need to be there," Megan said. "In person, on that stage." "Megan," Rafe started. "Jacob named Penn on camera. Jacob named Cress. But Jacob is dead, and a dead man's video can be discredited. A living witness standing on that stage, naming them out loud, in front of cameras, in front of 8,000 people, that is harder to bury." She looked at Rafe. "Penn will try to stop the broadcast. Ghost can run the AV, but someone has to be on that stage long enough for the feed to run, long enough for enough people to see it that it can't be pulled back." "Penn will have a shooter there," Briggs said. "Penn will have you there too," Megan said, looking at Rafe. Rafe was quiet for a moment. "I can't carry a rifle into that event." "Dutch," Briggs said, already moving toward the supply cabinets at the far wall. Dutch opened the second cabinet from the left and stood aside. Inside, mounted in fitted foam, was a disassembled precision rifle. Not standard military issue, something custom, the kind of work that takes time and skill and a specific understanding of what the weapon will be asked to do. Rafe looked at it for a long moment. He didn't reach for it yet. "I've got 2 sets of fresh stitches and no confirmed 0 on that platform." "We'll get you a 0, Dutch said. "We've got 6 hours before the ceremony." "I need elevation, clear sightline to the stage." He was already running it in his head, the math that snipers do automatically, the geometry of angles and distances and wind and the probability trees that branch from each possible position. "Penn will have counter snipers on the high ground, standard event security for a ceremony of that scale." "There's a parking structure on the east side of the reflecting pool," Ghost said, not looking up from his monitor. "8th level. At 11:30 tomorrow evening, the security sweep will have completed its last pass. 12-minute window before the next rotation." Everyone looked at Ghost. "I've been to a lot of these events," Ghost said, still not looking up. Rafe looked at Megan. Something passed between them. Not words, not quite a question, more the acknowledgement of a decision that had already been made by both of them independently and was now simply being confirmed together. "We're going to Washington," Rafe said. They moved within the hour. Ghost wiped the basement. Dutch drove. Briggs rode in the back with Rafe, not to guard him, but because Rafe's color was still not right, and Briggs had a way of watching people without appearing to watch them that Megan recognized as the specific vigilance of someone who had lost people before and had made adjustments. Megan sat in the front passenger seat. The road unrolled ahead of them in the pre-dawn dark, and she let herself be still for the first time in what felt like days. "You okay?" Dutch said. He didn't look at her when he said it. He was watching the road. "No," Megan said, "but I'm fine." Dutch nodded. He understood the distinction. Jacob Cross was a good man. I ran a joint op with his unit in 2018. Different theater, maybe 4 days of overlap. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's coffee order, and their kids' names. He paused. That kind of man is harder to replace than people think. Megan looked at the highway. I know. He'd be proud of what you did tonight, Dutch said, getting Rook out, holding together under Penn. He paused again, choosing the next words carefully. And what you're about to do tomorrow. He'd be proud of that especially. She didn't answer. She looked at the road and thought about Jacob on that hillside, the camera steady in his hands, and the calm in his voice that had nothing to do with the absence of fear and everything to do with the presence of purpose. She thought about how he had said her name, not afraid, not even sad exactly, just certain, like he had made peace with the ending, and the only thing left that mattered was the beginning of what came next. In the back of the van, Rafe slept, not the medicated half-sleep of the safe house table, but real sleep, the deep and necessary kind that a body falls into when it has finally calculated that the immediate threat has receded enough to allow it. Briggs sat across from him with his arms crossed and his eyes open and his prosthetic leg extended at an angle, and he watched the highway go by in the dark. He was thinking about Mosul. He was thinking about the night the radio call came in and the unit was told that Rook and Cross were KIA, confirmed, no remains recoverable. He was thinking about what he had said to Dutch that night, sitting on the floor of a transit hooch in Germany with a bottle of something neither of them could remember. The worst part is we can't even bring them home. And Dutch had said, the worst part is we don't know if they'd want us to. He looked at Rafe sleeping. 4 years. The man had been alive for 4 years. Moving through the mountains with a ledger and a dead man's camera and the promise he had made to a soldier who had pulled rank on him to make him run. Briggs had thought about what that would do to a person, carrying a promise like that alone for years, knowing that everyone who knew you was grieving you, knowing that you couldn't surface without getting killed, running the weight of it every single day until you found a way back. He had thought about it in the abstract. Looking at Rafe's face now, he understood that the abstract had not been sufficient preparation. The van crossed into Virginia as the sun was thinking about starting its work. The sky at the horizon went from black to the deep blue that precedes everything else, and for a while the road was empty enough that Dutch turned off the running lights and let the gray morning do the work. In the front seat, Megan was looking at the capsule in the sealed bag in her hand, the thing that Jacob had died to protect, the thing Penn had spent 4 years trying to recover. It was so small. She kept thinking about how small it was, how small the difference was between it reaching the right hands and the wrong ones. How many things had to go exactly right? The cargo ship, the Port Authority guard shooting low instead of center mass, the specific hospital she happened to be working in, the specific shift she happened to be on, the Morse code she and Jacob had learned at 11 years old, tapping through a bedroom wall. All of it. Every tiny hinge on which the whole thing swung. She closed her hand around it. Dutch, she said. Yeah. Penn will know we're coming. Even without the signal, he'll run the logic. He'll know the ceremony is the move. I know. So he'll be ready. I know that too. And you're still going. Dutch looked at her briefly. His face in the growing light was calm, and under the calm was the thing that Megan was beginning to recognize as the common quality in all of these men. Not fearlessness, which was either a lie or a pathology, but something more honest than that. The willingness to be afraid and go anyway, because the thing on the other side of the fear was worth the cost. Rook made a promise to your brother, Dutch said. We made a promise to Rook. He looked back at the road. Penn had 4 years. Tonight, we take it back. The van drove on through the Virginia dawn, and in the back, Rafe Hollister slept the sleep of a man who had been running toward this moment for 4 years and had finally stopped running long enough to rest before the last mile. The Lincoln Memorial was 12 hours away. Penn didn't know it yet, but his time was already ending. They reached Washington before noon. Dutch drove them to a row house in Anacostia that belonged to a name that didn't exist in any public record. and they spent the daylight hours the way soldiers spend the hours before an operation. Quietly, efficiently, with the particular focus of people who have decided that thinking too far ahead is a liability. Ghost worked on the AV penetration. Dutch ran the logistics. Briggs checked the rifle 3 times and then checked it again because that was what Briggs did, and nobody commented on it. Rafe slept for 4 hours on a cot in the back room and woke up looking like a different man. Not healed, not anywhere close to healed, but present in a way he hadn't been since the hospital. The eyes clear, the stillness purposeful rather than depleted. He ate everything Dutch put in front of him without comment and drank 2 liters of water and sat down with the rifle and ran his hands over every component with the slow, deliberate attention of a man reacquainting himself with a language he had not spoken in years. Megan watched him from the doorway. "How's the shoulder?" "Manageable." "That's not what I asked." He looked up. "It'll hold for what I needed to do. You're going to be prone on a concrete deck for 2 hours with fresh stitches in your back and a shoulder that was bleeding out 12 hours ago." "Yes," he said, simply, like she had described a mild inconvenience. "I need you to tell me honestly if you can make the shot," she said, "because if you can't, we find another way. We don't put you up there and hope." Rafe was quiet for a moment. He looked at the rifle. He looked at her. "I can make the shot," he said. "I've made harder ones in worse condition, with worse equipment and a 3-day sleep deficit." He paused. "And I have a reason this time that I didn't have before." At 3 in the afternoon, Ghost called them all to the monitors. The LED display system at the Lincoln Memorial ceremony was contracted through a company that used a proprietary content management platform. Ghost had been inside that platform since 4 in the morning. He had the override mapped, tested, and ready. The moment he pushed the trigger, Jacob's video would replace the scheduled content on all 4 displays simultaneously. Full audio through the ceremony sound system. No delay, no compression artifacts. 11 minutes and 43 seconds of Jacob Cross on a Mosul hillside telling the truth about Operation Cinder to 8,000 people and every camera in the National Press Corps. "Once I push it, they'll cut the feed in under 2 minutes, Ghost said. "The platform has a security override that routes to a human operator. Human operator will kill it when they realize what's happening." 2 minutes is enough, Megan said. "It's enough if every journalist in that press pool is recording from the moment it starts," Dutch said. "Which they will be, because the first 10 seconds of that video are Jacob saying Penn's name and Cress's name and the word murder." He looked at Megan. "You need to be on that stage when it starts. Not near it, on it. Because if you're on the stage, you're in every camera frame. If you're in every camera frame, Penn cannot touch you without it being the lead story on every network in the country." "How do I get on the stage?" Dutch reached into his jacket pocket and set a laminated credential on the table. An event staff badge with Megan's photograph on it. The photograph was from her hospital ID, pulled from a database that was not supposed to be accessible. "Staff catering. Serving team is on the main stage platform during the pre-ceremony setup. You have a 45-minute window to get into position before the security sweep locks down the stage access." Megan picked up the badge. She looked at her own face on it. She thought about how much had changed since that photograph was taken. She put the badge in her pocket. Penn arrived at the Lincoln Memorial at 6:15 in a black SUV that parked in the reserved government lot. Megan saw him from 50 yards away, moving through the crowd with the easy authority of a man who had attended 100 events like this one and expected to attend 100 more. He was in a dark suit, American flag pin on the lapel, shaking hands with people she didn't recognize, smiling with a warmth that was completely convincing if you didn't know what you were looking at. She turned away before he could scan the crowd in her direction. She kept moving, her staff badge visible, her tray of water glasses doing exactly what it was supposed to do, making her invisible. The serving staff at events like this were the wallpaper. Nobody looked at them. That was the point. She found her position on the left side of the main stage, behind the third column of chairs, close enough to the podium that when Jacob's face appeared on the screens, she would be visible in the camera frame without having to move far. She set her tray down on the service table and waited. Her earpiece, a small civilian-grade unit Dutch had given her that morning, was silent. She touched it once to confirm the connection. Dutch's voice came back immediately. "We have you. Ghost is in position. Rook is on the deck." "Rook," she said quietly. "Status." A brief silence, then Rafe's voice, compressed and low, carrying the particular quality of a man who had settled into a position and become part of it. "Green. Wind is nominal. I have the stage in the VIP section in full view." A pause. "I have pen." "Don't do anything until the video runs," Megan said. "I know the plan, Megan." "I know you know. I'm saying it anyway." She heard something that might have been the ghost of a smile in his voice. "Copy that." The ceremony began at 7. General Howard Kress took the podium to sustained applause. He was a tall man, silver-haired and straight-spined, with the kind of face that photographed well from every angle, and a voice built for occasions exactly like this one. He spoke about sacrifice. He spoke about the young men and women who had given everything in service of a country that would never forget them. He used words like honor and duty and legacy with the fluency of someone who had been using them long enough that they had stopped meaning anything specific and had become instead a kind of music, pleasant and structurally sound and entirely hollow. Megan listened and felt something cold and clear moving through her chest. In the VIP section, Penn was seated in the third row. She could see him at an angle, his head slightly turned toward the stage, his expression attentive. Beside him was a man she recognized from the financial documents Ghost had decrypted, a defense contractor named Reiser, whose companies held $4.7 billion in active DoD contracts. Every one of them built on the architecture Penn and Kress had spent 6 years constructing over the bodies of the men they'd sent to die. The crowd around her was dense and quiet and attentive. Veterans in their 80s with their hats and their medals. Families with children who had been told to be still and were being still. Young service members in dress uniform standing at the perimeter. All of them here in good faith. All of them believing this was what it appeared to be. Megan thought about Jacob saying, "I died for the truth." She touched her earpiece. "Ghost, 2 minutes on my mark." "Ready," Ghost said. Kress was building toward the conclusion of his speech. The cadence was rising, the rhythm of a man approaching the emotional peak he had rehearsed. The crowd was with him. 8,000 people leaning slightly forward without knowing they were doing it. Penn shifted in his seat, a small movement. The kind of small movement a very controlled person makes when something in the environment has changed and they haven't identified it yet, but their instincts have registered it. He turned his head slightly, scanning. Megan stepped out from behind the column. She moved to the edge of the stage, where the cameras could find her, where her face was in the frame. She was still carrying the staff credential. She looked completely ordinary. A tired woman in a catering uniform, standing at the edge of a national memorial ceremony. Penn saw her. She watched the recognition move through him. The name, the hospital, the calculation. She watched him understand, in the space of about 2 seconds, what was about to happen. And she watched the mask he wore, the pleasant, legitimate, decorated senior official, develop the first crack she had ever seen in it. He stood up. "Ghost," Megan said. "Mark." The LED displays went dark for exactly 1 second. Then Jacob Cross filled all 4 of them simultaneously. His face, 40 feet tall, dust and blood, and the particular steadiness of a man who has made peace with where he is. His voice came through the ceremony sound system at full volume, replacing the ambient music, replacing everything, rolling across the plaza like weather arriving. "My name is Staff Sergeant Jacob Cross, United States Army, 75th Ranger Regiment. The date is November 14th. I am recording this statement because I have been ordered by an American officer to die, and I intend to make sure that order does not succeed in its actual purpose." The crowd went absolutely silent. Not the polite silence of ceremony, the held-breath silence of 8,000 people confronted simultaneously with something that had no script. Kress froze at the podium. His hands were on the lectern, and his face had done something that no photograph would ever capture cleanly, but that every camera on those risers caught anyway. The specific dissolution of a carefully maintained performance when the ground underneath it drops away. Penn was already moving through the VIP section, his hand inside his jacket. "Rook," Megan said. "I see him," Rafe said. "Not yet." "I know, not yet." On the screens, Jacob spoke. He named Operation Cinder. He named Penn. He named Kress. He named the contractors. He described the extraction that became an execution, the radio call that ordered the helicopter to open fire on his own unit, the ledger that cost 6 men their lives because it contained the record of a 6-year criminal enterprise running through the upper levels of the Department of Defense. His voice was calm throughout. That was what broke people. Not the content alone, though the content was devastating. It was the calm, the absolute, deliberate Jacob Cross calm that said, "I am not angry. I am telling you the truth because the truth is what this requires." In the press pool, cameras were running. Every camera. The journalists had turned from the stage to their devices without discussion, the professional reflex of people who recognize history when it is occurring in front of them and know their only job in that moment is to record it. Penn cleared the VIP section. He was moving toward the stage with his hands still inside his jacket, and the people around him were stepping aside the way people step aside for someone projecting authority in a crisis. Assuming he was security, assuming he was responding to the incident rather than causing it. Megan stepped fully onto the stage. She walked to the center microphone. Kress was still standing at the podium, frozen in a paralysis of exposure, and she put her hand on his arm and moved him aside with a firmness that left no room for discussion. She looked out at 8,000 faces, at the cameras, at the screens still running Jacob's voice behind her. Her heart was hammering. Her hands were steady. "My name is Megan Cross," she said. Her voice went out through the sound system, clear and flat and unhesitating. "Jacob Cross was my brother." What you're watching right now is the statement he recorded before he was killed on direct orders from Colonel Aldrich Penn, acting under the authorization of General Howard Kress. The evidence supporting everything Jacob says on that recording is currently in the possession of federal law enforcement agents who were notified 2 hours ago. She looked directly at the camera on the center riser. Penn is in this crowd right now. He is armed. He is moving toward this stage. She heard the shift in the crowd, the collective intake of breath that precedes chaos. "Do not panic," she said. "Do not run. You are witnesses. That is the most important thing you can be right now. Witnesses." Penn was at the stage steps. His hand was out of his jacket. He had a weapon, and his face had abandoned the last remnants of the pleasant senior official, and was simply itself now. Cold, flat, the face of a man who had been running a very clean operation for a very long time, and was not willing to let it end like this. "Bennett," he said. He used her wrong name, the hospital name, the name he had tried to define her by. "Put the microphone down." "Cross," she said. "My name is Cross." He raised the weapon. The shot came from across the reflecting pool. It did not hit Penn in the head. It hit the weapon in his hand, the receiver precisely, with a force that shattered the mechanism and sent the gun skidding off the stage in pieces, and Penn's hand with it in the sense that his hand went with the recoil, fingers mangled, a cry tearing out of him that was the first completely uncontrolled sound she had ever heard from him. He stumbled. He caught himself on the stage railing. He looked at his hand, and then he looked up, and across the reflecting pool toward the parking structure, and he understood, completely and finally, what Rook meant. By the time you see the effect, the decision was already made. You were never ahead of it. You were never going to be ahead of it. Federal agents came from 3 directions simultaneously, not Penn's people. The agents Dutch had contacted through channels that bypassed every layer of Penn's network, the channels that led to a deputy director of the FBI who had been watching the DoD procurement anomalies for 18 months and had been waiting for exactly this moment, for exactly this quality of evidence, delivered in exactly this way, in public, on camera, unignorable, undeniable, impossible to reclassify or reassign or make disappear into a committee filing. They took Penn at the base of the stage steps. They took Kress at the podium. They took Reiser in the 3rd row of the VIP section, still seated, his hands folded in his lap like a man who had decided that composure was the only thing he had left, and he intended to maintain it to the end. The screens ran Jacob's full 11 minutes. Megan stood at the microphone and she let it run. She did not speak over it. She did not editorialize. She just stood there and let her brother's voice carry across the plaza, across the cameras, across the satellite feeds that were already distributing it to every network and streaming platform that was picking up the ceremony feed, which was all of them, because this was Veterans Day at the Lincoln Memorial, and the whole country was watching. When the video ended, the silence that followed was the kind that arrives after something irrevocable, the kind that means everything before this moment and everything after it are different things, and there is no going back across that line. Megan set the microphone down. She walked off the stage. Dutch met her at the bottom of the steps. He didn't say anything. He put his hand on her shoulder for exactly 1 second, and that was enough, and they walked together through the edge of the crowd toward the north path. Briggs was waiting near the tree line, his big arms crossed, his face doing the thing it had done in the van when he'd looked at Rafe sleeping, the thing that meant he had been afraid of this outcome and was now recalibrating to something better. He nodded at her. That was all. She nodded back. "Rook," she said. "Coming down," Dutch said. "He'll be at the vehicle in 8 minutes." She waited. The crowd behind her was not dispersing. It was consolidating, the way crowds consolidate around something they collectively need to process. Thousands of people talking to each other and to their phones and standing in the specific way people stand when they have just witnessed something that they will describe for the rest of their lives. She could hear Jacob's name moving through it. Cross. Jacob Cross. Staff Sergeant Jacob Cross. She stood in the dark under the trees and she listened to he